I've said this before, but dialysis is not some wonderful life-changing experience. It's really not. Once you are on dialysis, it integrates itself into every single part of your life. One aspect of that being working out. They tell you, like everybody associated with dialysis, kidney transplant centers, nephrology, they'll tell you to stay in shape, right? Working out. Now, working out gets a lot more difficult when you are on dialysis. It's not easy, as every other day, dialysis is pretty much sucking out all of the things you need to build muscle and help with energy levels. And if you find someone that's on dialysis that, is having a hard time, working out or training or whatever their form of exercise is, it's not because they're lazy. They just don't have the energy. You know what I mean? Like nephrologists that are doing the rounds inside the transplant centers will tell you that global dialysis is just the greatest treatment known to man until it's time for you to actually do something, and they'll tell you to work out and exercise and go crazy and go nuts and do all this other stuff until it's actually time to do that. And then it's like, well, I want to do all that stuff, but I don't have the energy for it. And the doctors are just like, well, just do it anyway, or try, or do the best you can. Then after all of this placating, then when it's time for you to do your annual heart stress test and you don't pass, then it's like, oh, well, you didn't do good enough. And then they'll try to tell you that, oh, well, dialysis is not an excuse for you not to be an Olympic athlete. And as somebody who, practices martial arts and does self-defense, you try as hard as you can, and it kind of feels like you're pushing against this wall made of water, and your hands keep slipping through, and no matter what you do, you can't really push back the tide, because it's dialysis, or kidney disease is always this ever looming thing over your entire life, and you try to turn your brain off, and you try to have a good time, and you try to just have fun with whatever it is you're doing, but that the very next day you got to go back to dialysis, and that same terrible feeling that you felt the day before is about to happen again. And there's nothing that anybody can do about it. Just yesterday, it took them 2 hours to push my blood pressure back up to normal levels so that way I can get in my car and drive home. 2 hours after my treatment. So that's 4 hours of me on the machine and then 2 additional hours. I was at that clinic for 6 hours. Not that that's not something that is new to me, because I was doing that when I was going through chemo. I'd be there 5-6 hours, doing that. But then they'll try to tell you that dialysis doesn't interfere in your life, that you can live a normal life on dialysis, and that simply is just not true. Being on dialysis is like being at an amusement park and not being able to get on any other rides because you're chained to the bench. I want to dispel this idea that I should be down on my hands and knees thanking the Lord above that dialysis exists, right? People with cancer have a million different alternatives to chemo. They're coming out with a different chemo drug every 6 months for people with cancer. And yet the only thing that dialysis patients have to help clean their blood is this brutal friggin' form of treatment that literally you have to craft your life around, and that there are literally no alternatives for, like none. You stop, you die. That's your only two alternatives. You either keep going or you don't, and you die. That's it. Like, and that is so unbalanced. But what can you do? You know? And I ask myself every day, should I just stop? Should this just be it and just call it and just deal with the consequences of, making my mom sad? Because what they don't tell you, and I've touched on this before, and maybe I'll go into more detail in a later video, is that dialysis doesn't get easier, right? It doesn't make you feel, it doesn't make you feel better, right? Long term. The longer you're on dialysis, the more complications arise from being on dialysis. And I'll touch on that more. But one of them is it messes with your bones. It messes with your bones, it messes with your teeth. Building muscle is very difficult to do on dialysis because you're losing proteins every time you go to a treatment. It's messing with your vitamin D, which can affect your mood, which can bring on depression. Your blood pressure drops significantly over years and years and years of being on dialysis, on top of taking blood pressure medicine. And that completely can affect any sort of cardio or any sort of weightlifting or any sort of movement that you do when trying to train. And it doesn't feel good. It's extremely discouraging to want to do something and your body physically cannot accommodate for the things that you want to do. And it's going to be like that for the foreseeable future until you get a kidney transplant, whenever that is. Whenever they decide to call you, they pick a kidney that's most compatible and then they give it to you. But there's no telling when. It could be a year, it could be 10 years. You don't know. So until then, you just gotta stay strong, you know what I mean? And like that, in and of itself, just to stay strong 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and never break all the time. It's exhausting and it's unrealistic. And all anybody can tell you to do is just try. Just try. And then when you try your hardest, they take you off the list. And then they tell you that your efforts weren't good enough. So what do? You're stuck within this rock and this hard place. And this is real. This is the stuff that like real people, not internet personalities, this is what real people have to deal with. They have to deal with the real effects of this and not just the 5 or 6 minutes that they edited in a video to make it look like dialysis is a great time, because it's not. You're only looking into a small window of somebody's life on dialysis. You don't, from an outsider looking in, that's not how it is for the person that's really in it. And I can sit here in front of this camera and I can tell you to be strong all day long and to never give up and blah, 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 and all that toxic positivity platitude. I can tell you all of that stuff. But it still doesn't change how it actually is and how you're going to feel. And you can put on a happy face and you can smile, but it still doesn't change the fact that all those real complications that really happen are still there. And it ain't going to be 100% great days all the time. So until next time, like I'm trying to put out like real videos from a real person with a real perspective.